same space. We recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you are currently on. Si c'est le cas, je vous demanderai de prendre la responsabilité de reconnaître le territoire traditionnel sur lequel vous vous trouvez, ainsi que les titulaires actuels du traité. We recognize that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. Glendon, en tant que partie intégrante de l'Université York, reconnaît la présence sur le territoire traditionnel de nombreuses nations autochtones. The area known as Takaronto has been taken care of by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat Nation. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis community. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampel Bell Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So thank you very much. And now, John, the floor is yours. OK. OK, Sylvie est là. Donc.
Oui, j'ai couru. Merci, Marie-Christine. J'ai réussi. John, would you like me to do the same thing as for the last time? Share your document and be your assistant?
Sure. I could always use assistance.
Yeah.
Sandra, can you please allow me to share my document?
Yes, I just did.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, just give me, yeah, there we go. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can.
See it now.
Okay.
See it now.
Go ahead, Don.
All right. So again, we're looking at names because they illustrate the language so well, and they're not very complicated words, so it makes it easier to do. The last lesson, I talked about the dualic, which is a prefix that gives the Wendat concept of two-ness to it, you know, of being two. Now, today I'm going to add another one called the coincidence, and how the two work together, right? Just to show you how it's how the language puts things together. Now, the coincident by itself means the middle. And with two-ness, like you'll see a lot of these names here have in the middle of, half of, right? There are a lot of names that have that. Okay, so just going through, and as I say, these are relatively simple Wendat words. They only have 5 or 6 parts, which is pretty much the average. You know, like I say, it can go up to 13 parts. Okay, so the first one, he is in the middle of the land. Okay, so begins with the coincident, and then the dualic, and then your standard parts, predominant prefix, a noun root, a joiner, and a verb in the stative. Most words, most verbs in Wendat use the stative aspect. Just about every name does. There are names that don't, but most names use that. So it's in a state of, something is in a state of. Okay, so the second one, she is in the middle of the sky. Now, with sky, and you see there's another sky, there are many, many Wendat names with sky. Sky is a very productive noun. It comes to have a lot of meaning for the people. I think I counted there's about 50 names that have sky in them. Just to sort of read out a few of them, it just, he is burning the sky, she's in the middle of the sky often falls, He is sky in the water. He is covered by the sky. Let's see, she is canoeing, floating in the sky, right? So you get a lot of that. The sky is a very important image when you're talking about names, probably one of the most common nouns that you're going to find in those names. Okay. All right. So, and again, same basic structure. The two predominant predominant prefixes, the pronominal prefix, the noun, the joiner, a verb in a state, right? So it's all working. Now, the next one, it is as big as the sky, half the sky. You'd love to know the story behind some of these names. Every name has a story. You know, names were passed down over generations. Everyone has a story. Often related to larger stories, the myths of the people, but unfortunately, most of those did not get passed down. So we don't know the full meaning of any of these names, or pretty much any of these names, unless you see, okay, I could see this as describing the clan animal, the clan image, and you say, okay, yeah, that works, right? Okay, now, any questions so far? I don't like to sort of race ahead because I have a tendency to do that. All right, the next one, two equal matters of or statements. The noun here is the most common noun in the Wendat language. It is used many, many times in names and in expressions. So here we have a notion of two things mean the same. Two things are meaning the same. Now, so here I'm going to move into what I call my linguistic political message. I always have them with things. Okay. Now, on the second page, we have, he grasps, is grasping a matter. Okay, it doesn't have the thing I was talking about. No, it doesn't have the coincident or the dualic. The reason I chose this, well, I chose this for two reasons, this particular word, because it's an important one. One is it includes riwa. The other part is this is a name that was first given to Francois de Laval. He is the first non-Wendat person to have that name. It was a traditional name. It is associated with the Bear Clan. And you can imagine, anyway, when it was presented in the Jesuit relations, it was translated as l'homme du grand affaire. Right? So it wasn't literally translated, it was the symbolic meaning of the name. Now, he, like I said, had that name at first, but when he died, as with other Wendat, Wyandotte names, it was passed down to someone who was felt worthy of the name. It became the name that was used for bishops. All the bishops to follow had that same name, right? So it became a title name. As well as being a clan name, it was now a title name. Both Wendat and the Wyandotte would call bishops by that. They were referring to a bishop, they would use that name. Just like with Anuncio, which referred to the governors, which meant, Great Hill or Great Mountain, because it was named, Montmagny was named, it came from his name. This one, I don't know why the Laval received this name, but it became just automatically assumed with associated with everybody to follow him. Now, it was also used as a title for the Pope, only you added to it, you see there, something that means great. So it's saying, he is the great one who grasps a matter. That would refer to the Pope. What makes me laugh a little bit is the Wyandotte used it in Ohio to name their first Methodist minister, right? So it's interesting that a Methodist minister and the Pope are going to receive the same name, right? Because he was the leader of the Methodists in Ohio. So the Wyandotte said, okay, works well, right? Now, here comes my linguistic political message. I have never once read in any of the many biographies of Laval, I have never once read that this was the name he was honored by. That bothers me. That bothers me. If a people honor you with a name, or with someone with a name, it should be known what the name is and what the honoring is. And yet I've never ever seen it in any of his biographies. As I say here, this should change. All of the Jesuits who lived with the Wendat and the Wyandotte received names. Some of them, Father Ricardi received the name Ondeshrawasti, which means it is a good or beautiful country. And I suspect that's because, well, he spoke about heaven a lot for the Wyandotte. So, there is one of the stories talks about the people in Ondeshrawasti, right? So you get the sense of, okay, this became a name that worked into their traditional stories as a name for heaven, rather than just in the sky. Chaumonot, Chaussetière, and Poitiers received the Wolf clan name, he bears the sky. He bears the sky, or carries the sky. Which, I mean, I don't know whether that was a traditional name. I suspect it wasn't, but still, it describes the person and became an inherited name. So you can see they did adopt. One of the things that part of Wendat history that isn't spoken of enough, same with the Wyandotte, is the adoption of people. If you came to live with them, for whatever cause, you were adopted. You came to belong in a clan. I would love to know Brébeuf's clan. I would love that. But his name was new. He received the name Haitian, which I think I said before, took Jean, and then added a masculine indicator H to it to make it Haitian. And, the name was passed down to Chaumonot, who was like him in that he was an expert in the language. Father Daniel Richer received the name, same thing. I received the name, right? So it becomes a title. It becomes a title. Okay, so anyway, so that's the political message. Just, these names are important. They're an important aspect of who these people are. And it tells you what regard they were held. To have a name such as this, you could tell that Bishop, certainly Laval, was held in high regard. They gave him a respectable name. And that's important. It's important to know because it teaches you about his relationship. And that's another reason why I want that name to be associated with him. And if I could change Laval's biography in the Dictionary of Canadian Biographies, I would add that. Anyway, such a political animal linguistically. Now, the coincident by itself, right? With some names, the coincident doesn't have the dualic, and it has the sense of at the same time. You're talking about two things happening at the same time, or that the thing discussed is happening at the same time as something else. So here, first of all, we have a name that uses a different aspect, right? Uses a different aspect. First of all, it uses the recent past. When something is just concluded, you use what's called the factual. Then we have the verb here to conclude, to finish. Then the ha is both what's called the inchoative root suffix. A root suffix that means to become. If something becomes something, you're going to find it near the end of the word. It'll be the second last element in a word. And then it's the punctual. The punctual means one time, concluded once. It's used in the future. You're talking about something that will happen, definitely will happen. You use the punctual. If something would happen or should happen, you also use the punctual, right? So, but it's very rare in names. You do not find it often in names. It's just very rare that they use that. Usually it's an ongoing characteristic. So I suspect here that this does come from a story. These are names based in stories. I really suspect that, because they're talking about a specific event, as many stories, as many names do. All right, any questions about that so far? All right, I move on.
If you have a question, just put your hand up and
Okay.
Oh,
Just
Marie-Christine.
just to comment on the name that the European receive from the Wendat. I remember that Saga received the name of a big general. I forgot the name in Wendat, but he was not too happy about this, and he asked the Wendat to call him Gabriel.
Yeah.
And they were not able to say his name. They say Abiel.
Yeah, because
he received a military
that.
title. I forgot the name exactly.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
But I know he wasn't happy. That I remember.
Yeah.
And of course, his name would be hard to transpose into Wendat because there was no B and no L in the language.
Yeah, sure.
So, it was pretty messy as a name to.
Yeah.
Like Brébeuf, he had two B's and an F. Right?
Yeah.
So they took his first name, which sort of sounded like something Wendat.
And another example of that is the young Frenchman, Awinsik, who received the name of a fish, but the history forgot about his French name. So it's funny.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because it's part of who he is. It's part of what people consider him.
Yeah.
So it should be there. It's just.
Yeah, but since he was a child, then probably.
But it is interesting that he had both those names. I like that. Okay, so the next one, then, at the same time he walks and goes at that place. So he was obviously doing something else. And while he was doing that, he was walking or going to a particular place. That verb there, which is a, can mean go or come or walk. It's a very common verb. It's often used. And there are a good number of names that have that. Some names have two words, and one of the words has to go. Like if you're talking about coming from somewhere or going somewhere, and another verb is used, you have some names that are two words. Not very many, but some of their names worked out that way. Right? That's the way it happened. right? So, and here, the causative root suffix, which usually talks about something happening, making something happen, also at the same time means place. I don't know why that is, but it is. I only discovered that a couple of years ago. I thought, hey, wait a minute, that has that also means place. Wow. You know, but yeah, and it's common enough to do that, you know. But, you know, languages have their own logic. Each language has their own logic. And for whatever reason, the Wendat decided that that's what that's going to have, right? I don't know whether the related Iroquois languages do that. I haven't seen that they do it. You know, they're similar in a lot of ways, but they're also different in some ways. You see different things happening in the different languages. But the roots are very similar, and there are names that are shared across with the Wendat and the other Iroquois people. There are a few of the names that are shared. All right, so must have, you know, which suggests that it comes from a shared story. And they did have shared stories. You know, they were, you know, like, you know, Europeans have shared stories among very different people. So the Iroquois would have shared stories. All righty. Now, the repetitive. Okay. Now, it's another prepredominant prefix. It's usually represented by an S, like a S or a ts sound. Usually means very or again. So it's going to be used a lot because it's descriptive. It adds, it's almost like it adds another verb. Now, when you see an SH written in Wendat, it's not, in this case, it's not a sh, it's a s followed by a h. So I have it here as this first name is Sahano Huare Reitsi, right? So it's not the sh sound. So very long head or brain. It can mean brain as well as head. The word for one of the ceremonies was kind of the brain going around, going strange, and it has that. So it has that meaning of both head and brain, just like you'd say, you know, use your head, you know, meaning use your brain, right? So it's a common enough association. Now, to be long, that appears in a number of names. As you will see, there's two names here, but it's a fairly, oh yeah, Candielong, yeah. That's an important name too, Candielong, you know, which I think refers to the fingers, because India means fingers. But that's just sort of throwing that in. Do you have a question about that name?
Ian's got questions about 3 names.
Okay. Give them to me.
Just a moment. Okay, I didn't want to break in, so I was typing them into the chat box. But the first one was, as you pronounced it, Kandiaronk.
Yeah.
Just by pure accident, I'm reading a history of intellectual contact between Europe and North America.
Yeah.
And his name jumps out
Yeah.
as a really significant interlocutor and critic of European ways compared to North American ways. And he was in the salons of Paris and London. Just an amazing person.
He was.
And Wendat. So if you knew anything about him or his name, I'd be very interested.
Well, it's the name of a street in Wendake, but it was sometimes misspelled when it was first written KO, which is wrong, you know, and the street name is KO as well. Now, I think, yeah, he was Wyandotte. He was Wyandotte, not Wendat,
Uh-huh.
but still he was a chief among the people, so that would be respected. Now, one thing I found very interesting when I was putting together my book, which should be coming out in a month or so, plug, the names of the Wyandot, that name does not get repeated. I don't know anyone who had that name after him, which I don't understand, unless it was one of those things, it was something that happened in his life. So maybe it with the thing, the symbol that was used with him was what looks like a muskrat or beaver. So it may have to do with that fingers thing, but yeah, when I found it, I looked and I looked for another instance of his name, because the important names, but not his name. So I wish I knew more about it, but I don't.
But he is known among the Wendat, as you say.
Oh yeah, he because he was so involved with the Great Peace of Montreal. That was his, major coming together point. That was when he was such a crucial figure. He was such an important figure in that. But like I say, his name was unique. It was for him and him only. And some names were like that.
The Mohawk name, one Mohawk name is spelt as I've written it in the chat, Kariwageron, maybe.
Yeah.
Can you help me parse that name?
Well, the KA would be YA in Wendat, because whether you get a Y and or a K sound in Mohawk and the other Iroquois names, you're going to usually get a Y in Wendat. An example is the word Toronto, right? The K in the Toronto the KA in Toronto means it. The T means where there are poles in water, which became the sort of general name, it's like the Anishinaabe name Majikane, which means at the fish fence. So everybody named that after those poles, because those poles had been there, from what the archaeologists tell me, for thousands of years. So that, the poles have been put, they're cedar, so that, they're going to last. And it does bother me that the last time I went there, there was a sign and it only mentioned Champlain, who was only there a short period of time, and yet it's such an important name to many things, and that wasn't indicated. Sometimes I think I'd like to make signs and put them up beside other historical signs. I know.
I would support you.
Good, yeah, because I want to add that stuff, right? Because it's important.
Let's do it on every spot on the Toronto carrying place from Toronto to Lake Simcoe.
I'm with you. I'm so with you on that one. I think that would be a useful exercise.
Okay.
And put it in deep so people can't pull out those sides, right? So you had another name then too, or?
Yeah, the other one now, I don't have it right in front of me in Mohawk, but it's a traditional name, so it relates to your discussion about stories.
Yeah.
And one of the twins that were the children of the Sky Mother.
Yeah.
Sort of a good twin and a bad twin, right?
Yeah.
The bad twin was called Flint in English.
Yeah.
But the good twin has the name He Holds Up the Sky with Both Hands. At least one translation. Another translation, sapling.
Yeah.
But the idea of the name being He Holds Up the Sky with Both Hands sounds like it might be dualic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it would be. It would be. Yeah. It would. Yeah, definitely would. The Wendat name I've never been able to successfully translate, But it is interesting that in those traditional stories, the name for the first woman on earth was a Cayuga name, meaning, well, maybe it exists in the other Iroquois languages.
Ahuansik or?
And yeah, it means, she is old. But that verb does not work in Wendat. Now, I tell you, yeah. Your body, which is very common noun root, but it comes from Cayuga, which fascinates me. But then there are some things shared by the Seneca and Cayuga with the Wendat. One of them is the word for corn. They share, the Cayuga and Seneca share the word for corn with the Wendat. The Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk use another term for seed. So they were both terms for corn come from a word for seed, fairly obviously, given kernels and that the planting of it. But it is interesting. So that's why I believe that the Wendat came in the west, through west of Lake Ontario. They would have come through the west there and would have encountered the Cayuga Seneca enough to get the name for the first woman and to get the name for corn. There was some kind of sharing there.
Do you recall the name of the good twin? And when that?
I'm trying to remember where. Look, where's a book that would have it? No. Feel ignorant. I'm looking for.
Okay, I'll look for it. You continue.
Yeah. My office is a bit of a mess because I'm doing several things at the same time. 3 books.
Wow.
And Catherine Brouet was asking if you would remember the reference of the Kondiarong source. And she says, I wonder if it's linked to the book signed by Laontan, which
yes,
Ian Martin says that's right. Yeah. So
although as we know, Laontan had quite an imagination when it came to his telling what he heard. But yeah, Laontan, there's a lot of material about it from Laontan. You're right. Okay.
Back to the repetitive.
Okay, back to the repetitive. Now, the next name here is a Wyandot name and is the most significant, in a way, Wyandot name because it was the name of their chief. It was the name of the head of the Deer clan. It was the name of the head of the Deer fratry or collection of clans. And it was the name of their general, their grand chief. Now, for years, now it's usually written without the H because, as I said, the H has to be there, but it's so underpronounced, the sa followed by a ha, that the people recording didn't hear it. They didn't hear it, so they didn't record it. It took me years to discover what that word meant. I'm so proud of this one. Now, just back to Laontan and for a moment and Kaniero, historians for a while thought that Kaniero was Shastaretsi because Kaniero was speaker. He was the speaker. He was speaking for Shastaretsi because he was a good speaker. So he almost refers to himself, if you misinterpret it, as Shastaretsi, but he wasn't. He wasn't. Wrong clan. He wasn't. He was just being the speaker for the people. Whereas, you know, Chatseresti was just kind of sitting there listening to him. Okay, now the meaning of the word, the antler spurs, right? So the things that stick out on the antler of a male deer, and not surprising that the lead deer is the one that's going to have the biggest rack, right? The biggest antler spurs. So it's a very appropriate name and would connect with a story. It would definitely connect with a story. So it's a very important name. I was surprised that I didn't get it for years, but I did get it and I was really pleased. And of course it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense for someone in his position. All righty. Now, the next one. Here we have used to mean again. Okay, to mean again. So again, he is blocked by ice. So it's a S followed by ha plus indes for ice and que for closed or closed in. Oh yeah, that's a. Yeah, I'm looking at the Onondaga word there. That was very different. That was very different from the Wendat name. And that word has a meaning. The Onondaga word has a clear meaning. But hey, okay. And again, it's in a state. So here we have a name with a story, a name that has a clear story going with it. You know that somebody was blocked while crossing the ice in a story. I don't know more than one person that had the name, so it could have, in a way, like people went through several names in their lives, and sometimes a name was highly specific to one person because it relates to something that happened to him or her, and would go through that name, and then maybe later on pick up on another name, and that name would be dropped, that name would be lost. Like Candiarok, it would be lost. Probably not lost in the memory, but lost in terms of there was no one with that name anymore. All right, so yeah. Okay, moving along. Now the next name, she is or has one voice. Oh, Skyholder, yeah, Skyholder would be, yeah. Which that'd be, as I say, a good name for the individual, yeah. But it's not related at all to the Wendat name. It's not cognate with it. So, but yeah, sometimes I look to the other Iroquois names to see if they make sense to me. But then when they do, and the Wendat name doesn't. And see, this other one has a meaning of, well, that one that was just flashed there. I think it has the meaning of inside at the end, and I can't remember what the other part of it was, but it looks to have the word to be inside in it, or the verb rather, to be inside. Okay, so now when means voice or word, right? And it too is a very commonly used noun, right? Word or voice when. Now, it has been one of the word, one of the elements used sometimes in someone trying to translate the word Wendat. But there is no good translation for the word Wendat. I wrote an article in the 1980s, which was basically, there is no meaning that we know, and it frustrates me, was the whole meaning of that whole thing. But Wendat is fairly common. There's the word for someone who is in charge of something. It's a positional name rather than, a name passed down, was Hawendio, which means he is great in voice. And it connects, you'd say, Hawendio, something or other. In the list of one of the beautiful things that Father Pierre Poitier did was record the names of the Wyandot, and especially beautiful, the names of the elders, the Elders Council, including his being the only one to list the female elders, even to mention that there were, there was the only Jesuit to even mention that there were female elders, and he names them. And one thing I found that was really funny was that whenever there's a relatively young man who's an elder, his mom is in the council too. So if he says something foolish, she's there to correct him. I figure that's like every time, like if somebody was in his late 30s or 40s, mom was there too, right? Just being sure, no, son, that's wrong. She'd probably say it much more nicely than I would, but still, I found that funny, right? And here it is strange, as I've said, that the repetitive is used with the verb root to be one. Here's something that means again, and yet it relates to the verb root to be one. So if you remember from when I taught about numbers, the number for one, the word for one was Scott, which began with the repetitive. And then when an S, like the KA there is a YA with the S changing the Y to a K. So when you have one of something and the something is a noun, you put the noun in there. Right? You put the noun in there. So ska'atat would be one of something living. So if you say it is one deer, you'd say ska'atat oskenoto. Okay, now, he is or has a very long canoe. Probably he has, but it's also possible linguistically to say, okay, could be is, right? S again, very, H, home meaning canoe, that ever-present verb, it's to be long, which appears in so many names, meaning long or tall, usually long. And again, it uses the stative. Again, it uses the stative. All the ones on this page use the stative. Right? And that's just, it's a function of the fact that it's very, very common. And that it works in a story. If you're talking about somebody and being in a state, it works in a story that way. Okay, any questions about the ones on that page?
Any questions? Nope.
Okay, the fourth page. And again, here's another one that uses it here. A very long, a very tall body. Scott and Deresi. Pretty much structured the same way, only it's female, right? Only it's female. And the idea of things being tall is refers to a lot of things. They use that a lot. It's very, very common. So it's not a surprise that it's there. Okay, so now animal names. Now this is strange. Most animal names in Wendat don't have a regular structure of a verb, right? They don't. I don't know why this is. And some of them I can't try. I mean, some of them are onomatopoeia, poetic, right? They're imitating the sound, right? So the word for owl is oh, right? Which, kind of the sound that an owl makes, and some of them are the sound that the animal makes. But we also find that the repetitive is used with animal names quite frequently, but in sort of weirdly structured words. Now, for the first one, it's not weirdly constructed. I think this one's legitimate. I love the sound of this name. This is a great name for an animal, Sutsisu, right? I like that name, right? I think you'd have to have a short name if you were close to a lynx and you wanted to tell somebody there's a lynx nearby, right? Because they're big. They're not little cats. And I've translated it. I think it means it is a standing blossom, referring to the tufts on its ears, right? A lynx, one way you can identify a lynx is by the furry tufts in its ears, right? So that that makes sense to me. That's a good, sensible name. Oh yeah, it has a meaning, it has a sense, right? Now, the word for beetle, I used it because it has most of the structure of a good Wendat word, right? So it has a noun, noshe, which means shall. It has the verb root to be split in two. Although interestingly, in this case, it doesn't use the dualic. You can't use the dualic and the repetitive in the same word. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't use them both. So they chose here the repetitive. Now you can see it at the beginning, it's C, but there's no pronominal prefix. I don't know why. I do not know why. It just, and because I've seen it over and over and over again, I'm not surprised by it. But still, it's a distinctive feature. I've never really looked closely at the other Iroquoian animal names to see if they do it too. It would be interesting, or whether it is something uniquely Wendat. I don't know. So now I've added to this a list of some of these other names. None of which, they all start with a C. Okay, is there not a misspelling in the name? No.
Just
because I've seen it in, there's a dictionary I translated of the 1640s, and they have, it's spelled like that. There's a dictionary I've seen of the 1690s, same thing. And the Wyandotte dictionaries I have of the late 19th century have the same thing. So it's consistent.
okay, it's just that it is not consistent with the blue root NOHCH, and maybe noch shell.
Yeah.
Written NOH. But Tsindochoyan is written, there's an N missing. instead of a H, or
Oh, yeah, that could be. A second, I'll check. I have the, maybe I just grabbed it from this list. Okay, where are you?
I don't absolutely I don't know any of Wendat. It's just, it's not consistent.
Yeah, no, I get that. All right, I'm looking up for. This is a great little dictionary. I love it. Huh. Where are you hiding? Huh. Should be in here. Yeah, maybe it's not in this one. Maybe it's in the later one. It is interesting because there's a word here for fly, which seems to have the same noun root. Interesting. All right, so yeah, it's hard with the animal names, because they're so often they do look strange, but then hey. Now, one of my favorite names for an animal is it starts like this. It's sawehohi, sawehohi. And it refers to an osprey. And the osprey is one of my favorite big birds. I love osprey, right? They're sometimes called the fish eagle, because if you ever seen them dive and pick a fish out of the water, wow. Now, there is an interesting thing. It was written by the Jesuits as meaning vulture. And unfortunately, the Wendat picked that up. Now, the reason why it picked up the name vulture is because in Europe, the vultures are raptors. They are related to hawks and eagles, but our vultures, the vultures of North America, aren't related to them. I think the closest relative to them are cranes and herons. So when the Jesuits saw it, and it looked like it's, what we call coincident evolution, where two different beings become very similar because there's a function in the wild that's necessary. It's like our flying squirrels and Australian sugar gliders, which are marsupials. They look identical, they act identical, but they're not related. So now it's the meaning of this as osprey is important, because for generations in the 17th and 18th century, the chief, the grand chief of the Wendat was Sawehohi. And unfortunately, they kept it meaning vulture. At the time, in the 17th and 18th, and most of the 19th century, there were no vultures in Canada. So it couldn't have been a vulture. Which is interesting. I learned that I went to a raptor show, and they had, because they have hawk. That was the first time I ever had a bird land on my shoulder. Now, of course, it happens every day. That's why I have to check before I go outside to see if my shirt is clean. But and that was an important lesson. I ended up calling biologists. I said, well, when did vultures first come? So I had to, at first I thought it meant vulture too, but I had to write 2 articles, one saying it was and another one saying it wasn't. But it's an important name. It's a very important name. Now, a grasshopper is called Siwatrak. T-S-I-W-A-T-R-A-K. So T-S-I-W-A-T-R-A-K. Now, it's close to the verb root meaning to jump, but it isn't quite. So I think, maybe it once did mean, the one that jumps, but it's close to. Now, I should give you the spelling of Sawenhohi too. It is T-S-A-W-E-N-H-O-H-I. Because, as I say, it's the name of an important individual in Wendat history. So it should be known, it should be remembered. Now the word for spider, another simple one, Sishekwan. And it has no meaning that I've ever been able to figure out, but it may have once upon a time a meaning. So T-S-I, C-H-I, E-K, W-A-N. Right? When I was teaching Wendat down in Oklahoma, I like teaching the kids the word for spider, and they learned it. That was one they learned and remembered and could say. That was kind of neat. I like that. So again, that's how the repetitive is used. Like, as I say, it's this last meaning is kind of very, very interesting. And it may just sort of add a sense of characteristic, who knows? But, if you're looking for logic, you have to know that every language has things in place that fit in and things that don't. English is a classic example of that. They're so English is such a messy language. It's structured weirdly. Anyway, okay. So any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Well, it's a common actually. When I look the word for spider, it's almost the same word that Sagar wrote in his dictionary. So the language doesn't seem to have changed a lot.
Yeah.
It seemed to be quite...
well, yes, because it's a word that would be used a lot. I think you live in a longhouse and eat corn, you're going to see a lot of spiders.
Huh.
Yeah, so a lot of the words didn't change. Now with Sagar's dictionary, one of the things I discovered about it, which is I think one of my best discoveries, was that it had St. Lawrence Iroquoian in it.
Yeah,
that just amazed me. And and he kind of saw that. He talked about, there are different dialects. He had a really good ear, because he could detect that some people spoke differently.
Yeah.
That's a good ear to say, no, they're talking differently, they're speaking differently. And so he recorded, he was open to it. Ignace, he was, that's one of the people that bore that name. But there was, at least, I think, 3 or 4 generations of people that were the grand chiefs of the Wendat who had that name.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of other people that do it. Well, yeah, just Iroquois tend to keep sort of these, like the chiefly names get passed down and are continued to be chiefly names. And I think when you have clans, that's going to happen because you have a political, a relatively fixed political structure.
There's also a question in the chat from Lise, and Ian's got his hand up. Lise, go ahead, Lise.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering about Marie Wendraka, but I know that you're working on, you told last time that you're working on the names of the Wendat, so maybe you haven't gotten around to her name yet, but I was just curious if you had translated it or not yet.
What was that name again? Sorry.
Wendraka.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I think I have, but I can't remember.
Okay, that's.
I hate that.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have. I think I have worked. Yeah, I know I've worked on it, but yeah, I can't help you, unfortunately.
Don't worry. Thank you.
Okay.
Ian?
So my first 2 little questions. One is about the book launch that you mentioned. You're going to be launching a book soon. Can you say a little bit about it? And maybe, Sylvie, we could participate as CRLCC in that event.
That was one of my questions for John. If it comes out in the next month or so, my question was, would you like to celebrate when it comes out or in the fall?
I don't know. I think when it comes out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be sometime in June?
Well, I suspect May, June. I mean, the publisher keeps moving the date back, right?
Okay.
At one point, it was supposed to be mid-April. So, but he's published a lot of my books, so I don't criticize him.
Any idea when you will have something more precise?
Well, after this is over, I'm going to email him.
Okay, that would be lovely.
Yeah, because
if it could be before somebody else takes over for the CRLCC, that would be lovely. I would take care of it. So that would be if we could try and arrange something before the end of June. That
would be great, because there's over 600 names in that book. Like I think 602. I've put together but haven't submitted to a publisher Wendat names, and I only have like 200 some of them, but with the Wendat names are more sources. But I kept, every time I reached a higher number, I was wow, and then when I got to 600, I couldn't believe it. I thought, and part of the thing is I've never seen a book about the names of an indigenous people. I've never seen one. I looked for one to see, it might give me some ideas as what to put. I looked and it didn't exist.
And that's the reason why we have to do something about it.
That's right. When it doesn't exist, you got to make it exist.
Yep.
The history of my academic career, right?
So as soon as you have details and maybe a short description of the book, please email me all of this, and we'll try and arrange something.
Oh, that would be great. That would be terrific.
It would indeed. And we also have another one coming out in the fall, Marie-Christine? So another one to celebrate.
Oh, right on. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, it is. The publishing of a book is something to celebrate. Getting a publisher to publish you in the first place is hard enough. Did I tell you my publisher joke? I
Nope.
don't know what happened. Okay, here it is. What's the difference between a terrorist and a publisher? You can negotiate with a terrorist. You say that to any writer and they will laugh because it's so true. It's so true, you know. And I always hate to get an email that begins with "thank you," because publishers always begin their rejection letters with "thank you."
But
But, you know, and usually it's on a Monday because they figure you're not too sharp on a Monday. Right? They might not understand it, you know, but, you know, I got
anyway,
one this
so
week.
we'll do something, John. And Ian,
Yeah.
you had a second question, I believe.
I don't know. Maybe, do we have any time?
Yeah, well, we could take 10 minutes if it's okay with John.
Sure, I'm fine.
Okay, so my question really has to do with, because you're so knowledgeable about the Jesuits and the Wendat, it seems to me that wherever else the Jesuits went in the Americas, they chose a language and standardized it and
Yes.
Christianized it as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
ripped out its beating indigenous heart, and set it up so that it could be used as a missionization tool
Yeah.
beyond the original group for which the language was native. And I've always said to people in Mexico who talk to me about Nahuatl, or Peru who talk to me about Quechua,
two
that
great
we didn't have
languages.
that in Canada. But maybe Wendat is an exception. Maybe the intention was to use Wendat as a lingua franca for Christianization of Indigenous people in Canada. Do you think that's true? And it was just sort of cut off by the war?
Well, it was used originally with the other Iroquoian people. You know, they used that, and they used it for the model for their work on other languages, like Mohawk and Onondaga, because they work significantly with those two languages. And I suspect that sort of borrowing of words goes two ways. It's not just the Wendat having the Cayuga word for the first woman, but goes the other way too. There are probably a number of words borrowed into Cayuga and Seneca that the Jesuits used, and probably in Mohawk as well. It's easy to convert Mohawk to Wendat. I found Mohawk to Wendat and Wendat to Mohawk. I find the two, you know, it's not a hard thing to do. That Wendat is closer, at least in sounds and in my ability to work with than the others are. Like Cayuga and Seneca are really, you know, I have a hard time with it. I have to bring out my dictionary before I do anything.
Interesting. Although you mentioned earlier that the word for corn is the same in Cayuga, Seneca, and Wendat, and that would give rise to the conclusion that the Wendat homeland in northern New York State was on the western end rather than on the eastern end.
Yeah, I would go with that. Now, another thing related to that, but kind of not, there is no cognate in any language I've ever found for the Wendat word for beans. I've looked, you know, for, you know, where other cultures that had beans, but it doesn't have a look of any of them. I looked at the Siouan words, the one, you know, different languages in the southeastern states. Not at all. But it's got to relate to somebody's, right? Because it doesn't have a, you know, it's a noun, but it doesn't fit in with any other noun in the language or any other noun in the language of, and it was the last of the three sisters to come to the people. So then you expect that it has a unique origin.
Does the word for corn have or southern origins, do you think?
I haven't really looked at that, but I could see that it might, and that they all picked that up. Because I knew who also had it, I didn't do the Southern search, right? But yeah, it's possible. It's quite possible because it came from there. So, the name travels with the thing.
Thank you very much, John, for today's
Yeah.
lesson.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Anyone else with a last question for John? We'll be meeting again in 2 weeks, but otherwise, for today, nope. Anything else in the chat that I missed? No, it's just another thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much, John. Enjoy the beautiful weather. And